Hello everyone. Thank you for spending 30 minutes with me to talk about the IPPF Evolution Project. IPPF stands for the International Professional Framework. Many of you definitely use that every day. It is the only globally recognized framework around the world, right? So my name is Lily B, and I am Executive Vice President for the Standard and Guidance area, and I also oversee the Global Certification area. I would like to share with you the feedback we have received with the current IPPF, our IPPF evolution projects, our goals, and the journey we have done so far, and the progresses we have made so far. Of course, our plan forward. Since its release of the IPPF in 2009, many things has changed. At ongoing basis, we continuously collect input from practitioners like you around the world, and from affiliates around the world, and also our stakeholders. In summary, this slide just summarizes the feedback we received. First of all, let's simplify the structure of the IPPF. If you recall, the current IPPF has the mission of internal audit, the definition of internal auditing, the core principle, the code of ethics, the international standard, and also on the guidance side, we have implementation guide, we have supplemental guide, some call that practice guide. People say you do have too many subsections, and it's not clear how they fit together well. So that's a lot of comments on that. Then the second one is, let's clarify, align various elements within the IPPF. People see the duplications and some inconsistencies. So the third one is that the standard do not include timely or emerging topical items. So standard has been very much timeless, but we wanted to figure out a way to make sure our standards are also timely. Now, another important element for each one of you, I'm sure, is how the IPPF to ensure that it continue to be practical and relevant and applicable, regardless the size of organization, regardless the location, the industry, and the maturity of your internal audit function. Another important element is, how do we communicate the IPPF? How do we advocate the IPPF, our profession, to the stakeholders, to the regulators around the world? So overall, the comment is saying the IPPF is no longer meeting expectation. So we want to see how we can change that. We established the project officially in January 2021. We have a goal. We say ideally, the new IPPF should inform the conformance of your practice of internal auditing with our international standard. But conformance is the mean, it's not the end. So we want to make sure through your conformance with international standard, we enhance the quality of our work. And we deliver the value for the organization that we serve, and ultimately we drive the recognition of the great profession of internal auditing. Here's the journey we have gone through, and some of the remaining steps we will continue. Right? We started the review of the current framework and researched many other frameworks existing around the world. And that was completed. And we also try to figure out what will be the new IPPF structure. And that was completed too. Our IIA Global Board approved it in December last year. Then before you start developing the new IPPF standard guidance, we want to figure out what is the governance process to help us, to guide us through the content development. What is the due process? Who is approving what? So that was concluded early this year too. Currently, basically in 2022, we are working on the standard, the content development. I will share a little bit with you today where we are, what we have already concluded, and we still have a lot to do. Concurrently, we have a stakeholder engagement, including each one of you, your affiliate, and many standard setting bodies around the world, and also regulators. So we want to collect their input now and also collect their input during the public exposure period, right? That's a step 5. We will move into the public exposure period next year, and then our standard board, our technical staff will review all the comments, and we will provide the revision before we issue the new standard guidance. So that's our journey. Thank you for being on the journey with us. So the first step, review and research. You may be wondering, I haven't received that. Anything. I have not had a chance to provide feedback. You may have. So in April 2021, the IAA conducted a global assembly. That was a virtual event. We have a representative from your affiliate from around the world coming to this virtual platform a number of days that gave us the feedback. And also in 2021, we had about 2 to 3 months global practitioner survey. This reached out to all the IAA members and translated in multiple languages with our affiliate support. And the global practitioner survey, we collected 3,600 responses about the current IPPF, about the feedback, about the changes you want to make. And we also did a number of interviews with the quality assessor. If you remember, our standard require at minimum once every 5 years, we have external quality assessment. Those quality assessors are the closest people that review many internal audit functions. So we did interview, we did a focus group with them. So they share with us what are the least conformance area, what are the area that we need to change the most. We do not want to look at the IAA within the IAA alone. We also benchmark with many other standard setting bodies, their standard, their framework, right? There's so many around the world at the country, national level, and international level. We did that work last year too. So starting later part of last year to the beginning of this year, we also conducted a global mandate survey. What that survey is to understand whether internal audit is recognized or required in your country. If it is, in what sector? And also if IIA standard or IIA's IPPF is recognized by the law and regulations in your country. And in the third element of that survey is whether CIA, the certified internal auditors, is recognized in your country. So this global mandate survey was completed by the affiliates in your country. So we want to know where we are. When we make the change, we want to reach out to those regulators who mandate internal audit or require using our standard. So we want to share the changes. We want to hear their input. So that's the first phase. The new IPPF structure. On the left-hand side, this is the 7 layers, 7 components of the current IPPF. On the right-hand side is the newly proposed IPPF structure. So in the future, we will have standard, we will have guidance. I hope it's much more simplified. Under the standard, we will have a general standard, which is the core standard. We'll start with principles, and we will have application standard. I will share in the later part of today's presentation. Of course, we will continue drill down to provide how-to. Those are recommended guidance. The standard are still mandatory. So on the left and right, it shows that is a high-level mapping, what current elements of the current IPPF go into the standard, what remained into the guidance. So in terms of the standard alone, right, this slide shows the new structure of the standard. It will start with the purpose of internal auditing, why we exist. More important than the definition of internal auditing, we want to tell the world we show the value. So start with the purpose of internal auditing. I will share that with you as well today. And the second particular domain is ethics and professionalism. Right? It will use the current elements of Code of Ethics and some of the standard into the ethics and professionalism domain. Then the third domain is governing internal audit function. First of all, you need to have authority. You need to have a clearly reporting line. That's your chief auditor reporting to the board of director or audit committee or supervisory board. So the governing is very important. And the next one is managing internal audit function. How do you manage the plan, the resources, the budget of your function? The last one is performing internal audit services. Each individual internal audit engagement, from the planning to performing to communication, is in the last number 5 domain. I hope it's intuitive. I hope it is clear. So I also mentioned the third major step we already accomplished is to organize our governance process around the IPPF standard setting and governance and due process. So earlier this year, we released a framework for setting internal audit standards in public interest. Yes, we set a standard for each one of you, for the internal auditors around the world. But each of you serve the organization that serve the public interest. So we wanted to make sure the IIA also doing the same. We set the standard in public interest. I don't know whether you know, the International Internal Audit Standard Board, the IIASB, is the very core key component that drives the full development forward. But on top of that, we do have an IPPF Oversight Council that oversee our due process. Those oversight council, including independent body outside the IIA, such as the World Bank, such as International Federation of Accountants, such as OECD or Intelsci. So they oversee our standard setting process to make sure we set standard in public interest. In order to do this, we must make sure we have a strong stakeholder engagement process, not only at public exposure period, but also throughout the process. So we created stakeholder engagement process now. All right, I'm sure you're wondering what is the change. First of all, I mentioned the first domain is purpose of internal auditing. This is the content development. This picture is just a high level to show the internal audit purpose is to enhance the value of organization and strengthen the organization's credibility with stakeholder. So they have 2 key elements. We exist to strengthen the credibility with the stakeholder and also enhance the organization's value. How do we do that? Internal auditors achieve this purpose by providing objective assurance, insight, and advice. That's it. That is the purpose of internal auditing. These slides may have a little bit more detail. So on the left-hand side, there are 4 bullet points. Internal audit strengthen the effective governance, risk management, and control. And also we strengthen responsible decision-making and oversight. Sustainable value creation. The sustainability is the key. The value creation and protection. Accountable stewardship of asset and reputation of the organization you serve. On the right-hand side, we say internal auditing is most effective when it is performed in conformance with international standards, which are set in the public interest. The internal audit function is independently positioned with direct accountability to the board. Each individual internal auditor is objective, free from bias and undue influences, and committed to make evidence-based assessment. So that's all. That will be the future purpose of internal auditing, and this was approved by the global board just last week in July, and we will put into the exposure draft. We look forward to hear from you, your feedback. So in addition to the purpose of internal auditing, I mentioned we have 4 additional domains: the ethics and professionalism, and we will have 5 principles underneath that. The current code of ethics has 4: the integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competence. We wanted to add more. It's very important we conduct our audit, with the professionalism. That is why the due professional care is the key. So that is added as the new principle under the ethics and professionalism domain. And the governing internal audit function will have 3 principles. Started with authorization of the function. We must be giving enough authorization so we can do the work. The independence of the function. Who does the chief auditor, the chief audit executive, report to, right? That's the independence. The oversight. How does the board oversight the internal audit function? Support internal audit function. So that's the 3rd domain. The 4th, managing internal audit function, started with internal audit strategy and started with internal audit planning, and then followed by the capacity of your internal audit management, right? Including the resource, the budget, and talent, many things. And then the stakeholder engagement. How do you engage and communicate with the stakeholder within the organization? In some cases, you need to engage the stakeholder outside organization. And of course, the performance of the internal audit function and the quality of internal audit function is very key to manage internal audit function. The last but not the least is performing internal audit services. Started with planning, the audit engagement, performing audit engagement, communicating the result, and follow up, monitoring the implementation of your recommendation. So that's the content. In addition to that, as I mentioned from the beginning, we added application standard, which in the 81 years IAA's history, we have never had it before. We wanted to make sure our standards are timeless and also timely. So the standard will start with the general standard. I mentioned will be principles, mandatory requirement, and we are also considering adding some recommended practices. And also this general standard should be universally applicable. On the application standard, we will look at audit practice. There are some requirement, additional clarification, and those will be applicable to specific audit practice and methodology. And in the middle column is audit subject. Those are the requirement and consideration in certain topic. Those topic and broad risk area. Then the last one is the sector, right? There's some special unique requirement for certain sector. All those mandatory considerations are included in the sector-based application standard. This slide shows you just some example of the topics we're putting in. Again, everything today is the draft, but we want to make sure we give you advanced information, and so you can be prepared. Hopefully you are excited. We create a bigger wave together for the IAA, for the profession of internal audit to make the change. So the general standard basically will cover the 5 domains that I already shared before. That is to pretty much to ensure this general standard are timeless. The application standard include a list of the items that show on the screen, and this list subject to change. subject to the approval of the standard board. But I do wanted to share this with you, and so you can look at it later on our website, and we will have more information. Stakeholder engagement. When we talk about stakeholder engagement, it is very key to include our own IIA's member, our own internal auditor, our own affiliates. And it's also need to include external stakeholder, the regulators in your country, the global standard setting body. So this just show one example. There are many engagement has been conducted and continue conduct throughout the world. So one example is in June this year, we did 5 regional forums, right, by Asia, Africa, Latin America, Middle East, and Europe. So we asked the representative from each affiliate, I hope they're also representing your view, to give us we shared what we did so far. We heard their feedback. So all of your feedback will be carefully considered for the future standard development. So that's the first I wanted to share. This is something more important for upcoming engagement opportunity. For IIA affiliates, regardless where you are on the world, we invite you to come to the 2022 Global Assembly in September this year, which is just less than 2 months, and in Washington, D.C. in United States. For each one of you who are practicing internal auditors, we offer 2 global webinars on August 30th, and this is free for all, including your member and non-member. Regardless, it's free for all, and we welcome you to join us to this 1-hour webinar, and so we can share more information with you. With external stakeholder, as I mentioned that, we need to set the standard in the public interest. We want to make sure we bring more external stakeholder to understand our profession, to adopt our standard, right? So we already planned 2 events. This is the roundtable, in-person roundtable event. One is in DC in September and another one in Brussels in October. We're happy to do more. If your region is interested, if we miss any area, we're happy to do that, either in person or through virtual event. So in addition to that, hosted by the World Bank and IMF, International Monetary Fund, and they invited a number of central bank. I'm sure your country will be invited. We will conduct 1-day workshop with the central bank chief auditor and all other stakeholders, so they provide input to the standard change. This is just some example of what we have been doing. But why the stakeholder engagement is so important, why we do that now. We know it's important that we are transparent, our standards are relevant, our standards are credible. But it's also important that all the stakeholders adopt our standard, right? So they see the importance of each of your work, and so they adopt our standard. So what's next? You probably think, what's the timeline? When do I expect changes? So this year, we're developing. We hope all the standards are drafted by the end of this year. It's a very ambitious goal, but we're still committed to do that. And we will working with all the affiliates around the world, which English may not be their first language, and they will help us to translate when the standard exposure draft, right? That's the draft for the exposure is ready. We ask affiliate to help us to translate. And after that, we will have a 2 public exposure period because the change is pretty massive or pervasive. We wanted to do the first standard exposure, potentially starting February next year for the general standard. That is 3 months. And after that, we ask you to give us input on the application standard during the exposure. So the input should be from internal auditors, affiliate, and our stakeholders. So we're hoping to release the new standard late next year, starting with general standard. And we want to give you enough time, to digest the new standard, to educate through many learning programs from the IIA, and we give 12 months when the new standard become effective. So using example, if we release the standard October 1st, 2023, the effective date of the new standard would be October 1st, 2024. That's how that effective date works. Of course, we encourage early adoption. I have a link on this website. If you go to the IIA, right, the www.theIIA.org/IPPF evolution, we will constantly post the current information. There are already a lot of information on that webpage, and feel free to visit our website to get more information later on. That is all I have today. Thank you for listening, and thank you for doing an excellent job to enhance the value for your organization. So all together, we contribute to the public interest, and I appreciate every one of you around the world. Thank you so much.